people seem to find my stuff funny, which was good because I was trying to be funny, so that worked out well. Humor is a defense mechanism. It's a coping mechanism for me. When I get frustrated, I'd rather laugh than scream because people like it when you laugh and they don't like it when you scream for some reason. I always say, well, even though I never wanted to write about disability, I always liked having a little bit of humor, and I think people accept, as one of my favorite movies, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, as Mary Poppins once said. So a little bit of humor helps some of the more bitter aspects, and I don't want to sound bitter. So if I can make you laugh when I'm telling you about some crazy, humiliating thing I went through, and we both emerged laughing, it's much better for me.
Well, as Matt said, some days there's nothing funny about disability. I mean, I have severe arthritis. There's an energy level there that has to be dealt with and so on. And I think that really isn't funny. And there's a lot of people with arthritis. They can relate. And so I too use humor. And, everyone knows comedians use humor to deflect their pain. So that's what I think both of us do. We both choose to look at the humorous side of all situations because there's no point in bemoaning the fact we can't change who we are. And I don't think either one of us would really change who we are anyway. We are who we are because of the way we are.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 298 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. I have an interview with not one, but two people. People from my old stomping grounds. I'm so excited I got to talk to again, because it had been so long. I have Matthew Del Papa and Vera Constantineau. Now, Matt is a voracious reader, a columnist for a local paper, the author of 10 books, and his 11th book, Jerry Lewis Told Me I Was Going to Die, is coming this May of 2023 from Latitude 46 Publishing. And Vera is a writer, a columnist, poet, and podcaster with a poetic focus on Japanese forms of poetry. She's a previous poet laureate of Greater Sudbury, and her new book is a poetry collection called Enlightened by Defilement, and that's coming out in April 2023, just a few days after this episode goes live. And this episode's going live on April 7th, 2023. Now, Matt and Vera are both former presidents of the Sudbury Writers Guild. I've long enjoyed any opportunity I've had to hang out with them or talk with them about writing or anything. And I'm so thrilled that I get to share one of those conversations with you, dear listener. We talk about the writing, living and writing with disability, the creativity expressed through nonfiction and poetry, the way they approach it differently, but the way they have this mutual admiration society, how they're sort of working on the launch of their book. They're both being published by Latitude 46. We talk about their publisher and why they love working with this publisher and so much more. And that's coming up later in this episode. First, let's hear a word from this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices is a platform that allows you to get audiobooks out into the global market. You can get your audiobooks into more than 43 retail and library platforms, including Spotify. They have some really awesome promotions. You get 100 free download codes, and Spotify is now available, or Spotify audiobooks, I should say, are now available to us Canadians, but they are available in all the major English language markets around the world. And of course, Spotify is very, very global in general. But what a great place for people to discover your work. Findaway has promotions. I've got some of my books in special promos, and those go to Apple and Barnes & Noble and other retailers like that. And you can only get into Chirp Audiobooks, which is run by BookBub, through Findaway. Now, I just got the audio back from Scott Overton, another Canadian, another Sudbury writer. Scott's a science fiction writer from, and he walks in the same circles as Vera and Matt and myself as well. We all consider ourselves, hometown, although they're still lucky enough to live up there. I'm living down south, but I still think of myself as a Sudbury boy at heart. And anyway, Scott just sent the audio back that he recorded. He did the Michael chapters for Hex in the City. And I just heard back from Sarah, who is working on the Gale voice, and we'll merge that together, and we'll soon have that. What is it? The 6th book out? 7th book? I can't keep track. Isn't that awesome? But then the audiobook will finally be out for that. And I'm loading that audiobook, of course, to Findaway Voices. Going to get it to all the platforms through Findaway Voices because it's nice and easy, and it makes life so much more simpler for me. If you're looking to hire people like Scott, you can find them on Findaway Voices Marketplace, where you can go and check out different narrators, professional narrators that have been curated by Findaway, to see if they're someone that you want to work with. And there's different options. There's the Voices Share program. Some narrators are willing to take less money up front for a royalty share payment split, so it costs you less up front, which is a great option that some narrators may want to do and some writers might want to do. I prefer to pay for the audio work up front, so I can just I'm free to do whatever I want with it. So that's Findaway Voices. And if you want to check out how you can leverage Findaway Voices as an author, you can check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. Now, just briefly, a few comments from recent episodes. So here's a comment on episode 297, which was Enthusiasm, Encouragement, and Alchemy for Authors with Joe Buer. And this came from Lisa M. Lilly over at starkreflections.ca for that episode. Lisa said, "Thank you so much for sharing this interview with Joe Buer. She took me right back to those moments of wonder when I was a kid at the library. I remember feeling thrilled when I discovered the concept of a series of books. The Oz books and Narnia books come to mind. And learning about all sorts of topics from ESP to code breaking to the care of puppies in the nonfiction section. What a great reminder to stay in touch with our childhood love of books and writing." Oh, I love that comment. Thanks so much, Lisa. Just I got tingles. I got shivers just reading that because, yeah, what a great reminder. I'm so glad that you got that out of the conversation with Joe. And thank you so much for sharing that reflection, because I bet you that helped other people remember that passion, that childhood love. We need to hang on to that. That's so important for us writers. Over on the Twitter sphere, Edwin Downward had said, "Once again, Mark Leslie made a comment in his closing remarks to the latest Stark Publishing podcast that has left me scrambling to figure out what just happened. This is a reason I often refer to graduation from high school as escaping an institution." Okay, so I'll be honest with you, Edwin. I'm going to have to go back and listen to it because I'm trying to remember what did happen. I can't remember the things that I said. So I'm trying to remember the things. I usually reflect on one or two things. So that's cool. That reminds me to go back and reflect and figure out what was it. And obviously it had something to do with high school. Was it my high school memories that I was sharing? I can't remember. But anyways, I do appreciate that, Edwin and Lisa. Thank you guys for leaving those comments. Now, just a reminder, the time is running out. The clock is ticking. Episode 300 is coming up. And I have had some great submissions from dear listeners on things they wanted to reflect on. Just short reflections. It's going to be 30 seconds, a minute, whatever it is. You can type it in text, or you can record so we can hear your awesome voice. And I can play that in episode 300, because I do love hearing your thoughts. I love hearing your reflections, and a huge thank you to Lisa and Edwin. Edwin's constantly sending those really interesting thoughts on Twitter that, again, kickstart my own reflections again. I love this mutual reflection society that we have going on. So, and I've got some great submissions for episode 300, but there still is time if you want to get your own reflection into special episode 300 coming in just a few weeks, because this is episode 298, and I can do the math in my head. There's just 2 more episodes and it's 300. So I got to get those in so I can compile them, etc., etc. And if I have to read them aloud, then I got to read them aloud. So there you go. So that is it for comments. If you want to leave comments, you can at me on Twitter. I'm at Mark Leslie. You can leave a comment over at starkreflections.ca. You can even email me if you're too shy to leave those comments publicly. Of course, you email me and say, I want to leave a comment. Let me know if it's okay for me to read on the air so other listeners can benefit from your awesome reflections. So that's it for the comments. I do want to also offer a huge shout out to the patrons who support this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections. Your patronage helps support the podcast, helps support my time in producing the podcast. Yeah, I do have a sponsor, and the sponsor helps pay for the hosting fees, but your patronage helps pay for my time in this podcast. And I do have to admit, I love the podcast. The thing I love is I love the interaction. I love hearing from you guys, making sure that what I'm providing is content that's useful to you. I'm not sure if you just heard a cat freaking out and tearing around in the house, but I'm just going to keep talking and leave that in there. It's getting close to dinner time. They're getting really excited. So I'm going to have to start wrapping this up. But I do want to say thank you to all of the folks who support this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections. That does mean a lot to me. And again, so does your interaction. And I'm getting lots of really great comments from patrons over on the stuff that I'm sharing for patrons, the special content, the special audio episodes, etc. In terms of personal update, I am just sort of between projects right now. I've taken a little bit of a break from doing any serious writing stuff. I'm working on some other projects, some of the books that I publish for other people. I'm putting together some of those editions and working with Sarah Katie's, for example, on some of the submissions of getting her 4 of the 5 books in her series are out already, getting them to various places for contests and stuff like that, and preparing some other books from people that I'm working with. And I've got some nonfiction projects for other authors that I'm working on as well. And then I've got my next book, Trivia for Die Hard, Yippee-ki-yay, mother blank. And that's coming out in July, so I probably need to put in my calendar to start scheduling the time to get that done. I've got the research done. I've got all kinds of notes and stuff. I just have to start compiling and writing that. And of course, I've already begun work on the next book on my Canadian werewolf series. Other than that, just, because, hey, I'm an open book and I share lots of personal things. This morning, I went to see my doctor. One of my clients that I work with is a bit older, and strongly, as he kept hearing, he's like, oh, you just got in from shoveling, eh? People have heart attacks when they shovel. When was the last physical you had? So he just kept browbeating me and saying, so I have an awesome doctor, Dr. Shan. And it was just great to go in and see her. She's quite impressed that I have actually lost 25 pounds since January, and there's a positive effect on my blood pressure. And she says, of course, you've lost 15% of your body weight. Of course, that's going to have an impact on your blood pressure. She's also impressed, with the awesome diet that Liz has put us on, which is mostly plant-based. Now I'm breaking the rules every once in a while, and I'm having things beyond just plant-based food as well. But I am eating a lot more natural plant-based food, reduce the amount of meat, and even reduce the alcohol intake. I'm trying to limit that to just a few drinks on the weekends. And my sleep is so much better. I'm feeling so much more rested. I'm feeling so much better getting those minimum of 10,000 steps in per day. All of those things, I'm feeling really, really great. The physical went well. And I'm just, maybe it's spring. Maybe that's just something in the air. You get to go outside. There's more sunlight. There's more things to experience and feel. And so I'm at that phase where I've got, the beginning of the next projects. I'm, focusing on my health. I'm 53 years old. I should, want to be around, the episode 300. Let's see if I can get to episode 600, maybe 900, maybe 1,000, whatever. We'll see. I'd love to be around because I am enjoying this process. So that's just some of the stuff that's going on with my personal life. And that's it for the introductory blather and ramblings. Why don't we get into this wonderful conversation that I had, and I think I probably had this back in January with Matt and Vera. So long time coming, because again, remember, these books are traditionally published. So the books were already done and in play and up for pre-order, etc. So I was kind of holding on to this. Well, I had a lot of episodes, a lot of interviews to go through, but I was holding on to this because I wanted to release it just around the time Vera's book coming out, just a few days after this episode goes live in the middle of April. And Matt's book is coming out actually on my birthday in May. So, within about 3-4 weeks of one another, both books will be out. And ideally, if you're interested, you can go check them out, because of course there'll be links to their websites, etc., and links to their publisher's website where you can check out their books. And without further ado, here is my interview with Matt and Vera. Matt, Vera, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
So before we get into the interview, I want to, and it's going to be ladies first, I want you guys to share a little bit about yourselves and sort of your background writing journey. So Vera.
Okay. Well, I am a longtime Sudbury resident. I've been here since I was 18 years old, older than anyone here. And I am the former poet laureate of the city of Greater Sudbury. I have been writing since, published since 1994. So, stuff out there.
Wow.
I wrote a humor column first, and humor is always going to show up in anything I write, whether it's poetry or whether it's prose. And that plays into the project I'm here to talk about today, which is Enlightened by Defilement, published by Latitude 46. It's a book of Haibun, which I know people are going to say, what?
Yeah, I
But
just said that in my head.
It's one of the Japanese forms, and I write in the Japanese forms. I find them really satisfying to write in. And yes, it's poetry, but it's not that poetry that makes you fall asleep or makes you wonder what's going on. Right, Matt?
That's exactly right, Vera. It's the good kind of poetry, as I always tell her.
There you go.
I want to get into that in a little bit of detail, but Matt, since Vera handed the mic over to you, give us a bit of your background.
Yeah, well, I'm born and raised in Capreol, which is a little railroad town about 45 minutes north of Sudbury. I started off writing nonfiction in university, basically, and got roped into helping a couple of friends with some websites and stuff. And people seemed to find my stuff funny, which was good because I was trying to be funny. So that worked out well.
That's always good.
Yeah. And other than that, I joined the Writers Guild in, I believe it was 2009, when I self-published my first book of what I called railroad stories.
Okay.
Basically, most of my stuff is hyper-focused on my hometown or Northern Ontario, the surrounding area around my hometown. My book with Latitude 46 is called Jerry Lewis Told Me I Was Going to Die. It's a series of humorous essays about disability and growing up in small town Canada, basically, and how that kind of the two affected each other. And once again, the few people who've read it seem to think it's funny, which is good because that's what I was going for again. So fingers crossed that people will like it. So.
And just a disclaimer, normally when I say the few people who read it, it means my books haven't sold, like as a joke, being self-deprecating. But these books are coming out. So Vera's book's coming out in April 2023, and Matt, yours is in May?
May the 6th. I pushed for May the 4th because I wanted to be able to say May the 4th be with you. But my publisher wouldn't go for it. She wanted the Saturday. So it's Saturday, May 6th for me. And Vera, yours is what? April
15th.
Wow. Yeah. Very cool. And May 6th is a really awesome day because a tall bald guy was born that day. Well, he was short and bald when he was born, but now he's tall and bald. So, but okay. So you both mentioned humor and how that's important. Guys, what's so funny about disability? And you can start, either one of you can start first.
I'll let Matt go first.
Sure. What's funny about disability? Well, some days nothing, some days everything. It really depends who you're talking to and the sort of mood they're in at the time. I've found humor is a defense mechanism. It's a coping mechanism for me. When I get frustrated, I'd rather laugh than scream because people like it when you laugh and they don't like it when you scream for some reason.
For some reason.
But yeah, I always say, well, even though I never wanted to write about disability, I always liked having a little bit of humor, and I think people accept, as one of my favorite movies, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, as Mary Poppins once said. So a little bit of humor helps some of the more bitter aspects, and I don't want to sound bitter. So if I can make you laugh when I'm telling you about some crazy, humiliating thing I went through, and we both emerge laughing, it's much better for me. So that's generally what it is people are more accepting of humor than any other, at least in my experience. Maybe it's because I'm a terrible writer and I can't convey disappointment and sorrow and stuff effectively without sounding really, really depressing. But my humor seems to work. So,
Right.
And I'll just keep beating that horse until it stops kicking. So,
Right.
Vera?
Well, as Matt said, some days there's nothing funny about disability. And I mean, I have severe arthritis. There's an energy level there that has to be dealt with and so on. And I think that really isn't funny. And there's a lot of people with arthritis. They can relate. And so I too use humor. And everyone knows comedians use humor to deflect their pain. So that's what I think both of us do. We both choose to look at the humorous side of all situations because there's no point in bemoaning the fact we can't change who we are. And I don't think either one of us would really change who we are anyway. We are who we are because of the way we are.
Right.
And yeah. So, I think although Matt's book is funny, but it's also honest. And I think that's the value of Matt's book. He's brutally honest and also really funny. So, that really plays in. In my case, because mine's a memoir, I don't think I mentioned arthritis once, which is a big failing on my part. But But I think because I use humor in life situations, our books are dissimilar. Mine is Haibun, his is essays. Mine is my life told in snippets. His is my life told as I relate to it every day. And I think that's the difference, and that's how it plays in for us.
Okay. Let's talk about this form of Japanese poetry and just your love and passion for poetry in general. I mean, you talked earlier about there's something about the form that worked well for you there. Can you explain what that is? I know what haiku is, but what's this form that you're talking about? How do you pronounce it?
Haibun.
Haibun. Okay.
Haibun. Sounds like you're pulling a trick on someone, but no, it's a real thing. I have been writing in the Japanese forms for about 20 years now. I started with haiku. Haibun is the combination of prose and haiku, or a senryu, which is the human haiku. And so you give all parts of it have to work in synchronization. The title has to work for a living. The prose piece has to have a relation to your senses, and a haiku is meant to be, here's what happened next. So I'm introducing you to the topic with the title. I'm giving you all the details I'm going to give you in the body of the prose piece that tells you the story I want you to hear. And then I'm going to say, and then you know what happened? And then comes the next part.
Okay. It seems like you enjoy the structural elements that kind of take the emotion, take the experience, and allow you to repaint them with those very specific types of brushes, I guess. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah, it is. And in fact, I would say because there's such a reflective quality to writing poetry in general, I think because poetry is emotion. If I'm not delivering, I have failed. So I aim to give you how I'm feeling in this moment with this haibun. That said, I would do the same thing with any haiku I wrote too. I am trying to give you the shortest word picture imaginable to show you what I am seeing and how it is affecting me. And that is what I'm delivering, I hope, in this book. And I hope that my experiences throughout my life come through in this thing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm.
Now, Matt, I want to flip over to the essays with which you did your book on. And I'm remembering you created, I think it was Creepy Capital, that was a combination of fiction, but also essays. And I do remember humor in some of those. Is that just been a form you've long adapted to?
Yeah, I never really set out to write essays, like school essays, which people think of, like dry and educational or informative. It's even when I was in university, one of my favorite writers, I can remember him on an interview, was a guy named Spider Robinson, pretty famous Canadian sci-fi writer, American expat Canadian, very, very funny man. And he talked about going to university and describing writing an essay for a class with 300 other people. And he says, the professor is reading the same essay 300 different times. You can make them laugh. So he quoted the line from Mary Tyler Moore, which was a little song, a little dance, a little seltzer down the pants. And if you can get the professor to laugh. And so when I was in university, I wasn't much of a scholar. I'm a lazy man. I'll admit that right now. So I would start with humorous footnotes like Terry Pratchett. And then and people would comment was, essay is not very good, but your notes were funny. And B plus, hey, I'll take that, and in my life, it's just I don't really do fiction well. I try my hand at fiction. I mean, I can stumble through, but for some reason, nonfiction kind of works for me. Perhaps like Vera said, because I am brutally honest. I don't care if I look like an idiot. I'll accept that and make myself look like a fool, and I'm happy. But essays were like, I think it's more of a marketing term, essay. I always just call them say stories, even though they're not in the third person. They're mostly first person. They're mostly 99% of them are nonfiction, although I did stretch the truth timer 50 just for humorous effect. But yeah, and just before I finish up on that, I just got to say, for Vera's poems, I've been fortunate enough to read some of her haiku. I haven't read any of her haibun yet, but her haiku is it's the kind of writing for somebody who writes longer form. I imagine, Mark, you're writing mostly novels now. I write a lot of short stories, and I've tried my hand at novels, and it is so frustrating when you read Vera's stuff and she can pack a punch in like 10 words that makes you want to cry. And I can do 50 pages and not get the same emotional impact. That poetry is, when in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing, and make no mistake, Vera knows what she's doing, is extremely powerful. And so I'm looking forward to reading her new book when it comes out, and not looking forward to selling mine alongside hers, because like I said, my stuff tends to be silly and her stuff tends to be extremely powerful. So
Thank you, Matt. I'm sorry I made you cry.
More than once, but it was on purpose, so that's okay.
Well, sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I guess you can't become the poet laureate and have won the awards that Vera has without having some real stake in the ground in terms of skill and ability as a writer. So that's amazing. Now, you talked about, this is an interesting thing. So Latitude 46 is a very unique local Northern Ontario, mid-Northern Ontario publisher that is not a giant conglomerate like a HarperCollins or a Penguin Random House or something like that. And you have two authors releasing books that are complementary and yet also, as you mentioned, approaching disability and approaching, memoirist, because they're both memoirs in different formats, right? Mm-hmm. At the same time, and normally one of the things that happens in publishing is, Random House ago, I remember one of the first authors I worked with to help self-publish, and this was a book that Lawrence
Stephen.
What's that?
Lawrence Stephen?
No, not Lawrence Stephen.
Oh.
Sorry. The Book of Negroes.
Oh,
Lawrence
yes.
Hill.
Lawrence Hill, yeah. Lawrence Hill had worked with this author to help her refine it. And he's he's an okay writer, right? No one's ever heard of him. and she had this great book. She had been on Oprah, but it was a book about how she had lost weight just by following Canada's food guide and starting to walk and then running. She ran the Boston Marathon by the time she was 50 or whatever. And so they just said, yeah, we published a diet book this year already. Like, that was their attitude. And they have this giant publishing house with all these resources, and yet they go, yeah, we published a book like that. So here you have this publisher, and we have had Heather from Latitude 46 on the podcast to talk about what she does. Now, she has these two authors from Sudbury area, the greater city of Sudbury as we now know it, who have memoirs, and I love the fact that they're almost like they're complementary, because they approach memoir, they approach personal memoir from a resident from the area. And so I'm curious about it. Seems like a very strategic move to say, hey, I've got two different voices writing in two different styles. Maybe it's depending on your mood, maybe, and I can suspect that there may be readers who maybe they're intimidated by a format like essays, or poetry. Like, just, people go, oh no, that's too much for me. It's too highbrow. But it seems like she's done a good job of that. So I just want to talk a little bit about your experiences working with a publisher like this.
Well, in a word, I would say my experience has been wholly good.
Right.
And I think Matt and I are very complimentary to each other. We're going to bill ourselves as the rolling writers, because when he rolls in his wheelchair and I come in on my mobility scooter, people better just part the waters, because we are complimentary to each other. First of all, there's a lot of respect there. And
right.
I think it's mutual. And I think that working with Heather, because she's local, means access.
Right.
Like, I know that my experience with her has been that I will have a question and I'll send it off and I'll get a response very quickly. And I appreciate that. And I don't think you get that as readily with other places. I've been with other small presses, and I found that small presses are really a great resource for writers when you're in one. I don't know what Matt's experience has been like, but I'm sure it's been, relatively close to my own. Matt?
Yeah, I haven't dealt with a lot of publishers. I've submitted a couple stories, but the nice thing about Latitude 46 is you're dealing with the publisher herself. Like, you're not dealing with middlemen. You're not dealing with, you have an issue with the editor. You have an issue with the cover. It doesn't matter what the issue is. She's there. She's answering emails. She's on the phone. There's my dog barking. Sorry. And I was hoping
my dogs are barking too.
Sorry. But yeah, no, it's a different experience than a large multinational conglomerate. This is a couple person operation. There's a familiarity and an intimacy that Heather can bring to the work that is very reassuring for someone like myself who hasn't had a lot of experience. She's walked me through step by step if when it's necessary, and it's been an experience that I've mostly enjoyed. I mean, there's the odd hiccup here and there that goes with the territory, but yeah, I'm already working on a pitch for another book with them, and hoping to surprise them this summer when they're not expecting it.
I would like to add the hiccup thing too, because I have introduced a couple of hiccups myself, and she is very forgiving.
Yeah.
That's good. That's fantastic. Can you guys talk about, I'm from your old stomping or rolling grounds, as they may say, and what's so unique about Northern Ontario writers? He asked knowingly.
Aside from bearing up under the snow, you mean?
Oh.
I would say that, as a Northern writer, I don't know what Matt's experience is like, but in my case, because I write poetry and the Japanese forms in particular, the nature element of Northern Ontario has been pivotal to what I write as haiku or senryu or haibun, manga. I write in those four forms, and you are meant to use your five senses. And I don't know how you could be outdoors in Northern Ontario and not be affected by the beauty of your surroundings. The number of lakes we have here, not to promote this, I mean, it is greater Sudbury after all. And I think that the downside of being a northern writer is that there aren't as many avenues to promote your work, or to, I don't know, just to be exposed to other things that you would be exposed to in bigger cities such as Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver. So there's that. And also, I mean, one of the things that has happened here, though, is Wordstock.
Yeah.
Heather Campbell is the owner operator of Wordstock, and every year it just gets better. And she brings in name writers, and there's almost free access to everyone there. And I mean, at some point they're going to get tired and leave you. But it is really good. And I think that's something we benefit from, as well as, people who are in the audience as writers, thinking of these other writers who come to us and present, and then at some point that may be us. I'm looking forward to that part on a limited scale.
Yeah, I have to agree with most of what Vera said. I would one thing I want to stress, since I'm on the board of directors for Wordstock, I should mention it's the 10th anniversary in 2023, and we're hoping to have bigger and better than ever before, which I'm kind of really looking forward to. As to Northern Ontario writing, I read a book, and that title escapes me, as does the author, a while back, but it was about stand-up comedians in Canada and why Canadian stand-ups seem so well prepared when they land in the States. And the author's argument was basically because Canada is so big geographically and so small demographically that you have to want it more, because you're driving, crisscrossing this whole freaking country in the middle of January to do a gig in Saskatchewan and another gig in North Bay, within 2 days,
Right.
So if you don't really believe in what you're doing, you're just going to quit. And the literary scene in Sudbury is better than it was, 20 years ago, but it's still, fairly small and fairly insular, but you have to want it. You have to work at it. And I think the other thing about a small community is it's a small community. It's everybody knows everybody. They're very welcoming. When I joined the Writers Guild in 2009, Vera took me under her wing. Several other members were extremely kind to me, really kind of made me feel welcome. And I'd like to think I've done the same in my turn as now a longtime member. And there's I hate to say family because that seems really cheesy, but there is there's a respect and an understanding that we have, because we share so much. The love of the written word, the difficulty in landing an agent or a deal when you're dealing with people in New York or LA,
Right.
maybe Toronto if you're lucky, and even then it's the cultural shift from Toronto to Sudbury is huge. So I imagine you've gone through that yourself, Mark, over the years when moving from Onapik Falls, you said?
Yeah.
Down to the Toronto area. So I mean, the culture shock is huge.
Yeah.
Dealing with people who are unfamiliar with their background. I'm sure we've all gotten a joke from somebody from Toronto is, do you live in an igloo? All that stuff, and it's it's ridiculous, but it's true. So
Right. I had more people living in an apartment building in Hamilton than lived in the town I grew up in. So it's like the culture shock right there. More people in my first year university class than were in my entire high school. So, and I have to speak to that as well, because I have been a member of the Sudbury Writers Guild, even though I haven't lived there full-time since 1988. I still connected to the community. My mom was there, and I never felt like an outsider. I always felt welcomed and warmed, as a sort of a distant member of the group. And even when I've come to talk to the group, it was always like a homecoming. So that feeling of family is very clearly something that you get in that group. So I think the other thing that I wanted to talk to you both about is we joked a little bit about like why humor is important, and the rolling writers and all of these things that you guys are constantly doing. You used a term when we were communicating, to set this email up, and you said criplet. And I had never heard that term before. So I was like, what is criplet, and why is that important?
Yeah, criplet is like Canadian Canlit. It's an abbreviation for a very specific subgenre of literature.
Okay.
It's not universally accepted because not everybody likes the idea of being called crippled. Some people embrace it as a reclamation.
Okay.
Other people find it offensive and limiting.
Okay.
But the idea of criplet is there is a lot of disabled writers out there. Not necessarily, everybody's in a wheelchair. Some people have visual impairments. There's auditory, whatever your issue is, and it's an issue of some sort or another, they open up and it's heard. Okay. Vera, did you want to add something to that? Sorry.
No, sorry. I'm one of those people who never thought of myself as crippled ever. I have crippling arthritis, but I am not crippled. My brain works, my mouth works really well. Matt as well. I mean, we are brainy, humorous people.
Right.
And so I think that, for me to use that term is foreign because maybe I'm in denial, but I don't think so. I know who I am.
Right.
And but I get what Matt is saying about that community. They are very supportive of, each other and what they are doing. And part of their thing, if I'm not wrong, is that they want to bring more normalcy to people who are introduced as, afflicted by something. Right. In the writing, in these, pieces of work that we don't want the stereotype, guy in a wheelchair who always gets talked to really loud, even if we're not deaf. And so I think that's part of it, making it more normal every day. Oh, so you have a wheelchair. Oh, so you have a, whatever.
Right.
And I think that is the value of recognizing the criplet community for what it is. It's a way of showing normalcy.
Right. It legitimizes our point of view, which is important. I was fortunate enough to land a story with Renaissance Press's anthology Nothing Without Us 2, which was a sequel to Nothing Without Us. And when I saw the call out, it was a writers group for disabled writers. Somebody just mentioned casually they're looking for stories. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Do I really want to write a story about a disabled character? I don't really do that very often, And then I sat down and you know what? It came fairly easy and people seemed to like it, which was good. And that's led to a couple other groups and some other options for me. So, I mean, that project alone has landed me 2 stories directly and inspired another half a dozen. So, I mean, if nothing else ever comes of it, it's been beneficial to me. And I'm sure every other member of those groups finds something else worthwhile in getting together. And I mean, hate to say this, but thank God for the pandemic, because Zoom has been a boon for isolated people like myself and small town Capreol. There's not a big writing community in a small town like this. There's a couple of people, we know each other, but when travel is difficult, I can click on Zoom and I can be talking to Vera in Coppercliff and Mark in Toronto, Ottawa. Where are you, Mark?
I'm in Waterloo.
Waterloo, there you go.
I got who gets around.
Somewhere down south.
The
GTA, let's just say that.
Yeah, the greater GTA. So I think, well, I want to talk a little bit about accessibility too, right? Because you talked about that, and that's an important thing, right? Getting out to events and stuff like that, especially with mobility issues, right? When you require a ramp or you require stuff like that. You did talk about the fact that suddenly everyone's isolated at home. Nobody can go out. Therefore, we're suddenly on a very equal playing field. I mean, I can imagine that must have been, while it was, a challenge for a lot of people, it was also potentially a little bit liberating in some ways, or it created a more equal platform.
I think it mainstreamed the accessibility features that were out there that a lot of people didn't know about. Like even myself, I didn't know, I don't do social media, or at least I didn't prior to the pandemic.
Right.
And I was on Facebook, but I didn't go on very often. I had a Twitter account, I never used it.
Right.
But there are a lot of disabled people, especially more severely disabled people who are bedridden and such like that, who are social media experts, and they know how to Skype, they know how to FaceTime, they know all that stuff, and that is their world is through the computer interface. But now, because of the pandemic, we all got a taste, and some people liked it, and some people cannot stand it,
Right.
and others can't keep their pants on for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. So, but yeah, it's been like I said, other than the tragic deaths and suffering and all the other ridiculous hardships that people are basically losing their minds over, some rightly so and some less rightly so. There is, and I hate to say this, but there's always a silver lining, and this for us, for people like myself, and I think I'm safe to say for Vera as well, because I know she's done some Zooms in England and some other world around the world that she would never got to in real life.
Right.
And yeah, so it's been great. And as to the accessibility thing, I'm monopolizing the answer here. Sorry, Vera, but I know when the publisher brought me in and said we want to do your book, what can you do for promotion? I'm like, well, I can do anything on the computer you need me to do, but I can't travel. Like I can maybe go to North Bay as a 2-hour limit. I can't overnight. So
Right.
I mean, she immediately pulled out her pen and started crossing off dates that things she had lined up. Book fairs and literary festivals and stuff. Like, well, Matt can't go to Toronto. Matt can't go to Thunder Bay. So it's changed things for me. But at least thank God for, and I'm sure the stockholders would be happy when I say thank God for Zoom. So
Yeah.
Vera, did you want to?
Well, I would agree with Matt. I think, when I became poet laureate, the day the pandemic locked everybody down.
Oh.
And so my entire 2 years as poet laureate was all over the world. And I took Sudbury outward, which was such a gift. And as a result of that, I made fantastic contacts all over the place.
Wow.
And I am internationally launching my book as well in England in April. So that's part of who I became with Zoom. And that is the only upside of it for me. I mean, or the only upside of the pandemic, I mean. And
Yeah.
yes, to accessibility, and yes, to venues that need to get smarter. And, don't tell me it's accessible and then I get there and there's a 4-inch step. I can't do that.
Yeah.
So it's maybe accessible. Oh, it's just a little step. Or as they like to say in Valparaiso, it's just a little step. So, I don't think I can do it. So I think you have to be aware that all these things are necessary just to do. And I think the pandemic really taught people about not being able to do everything they wanted to do. Welcome to our world.
Wow.
We don't get to do everything we want to do. I'm in the same boat as Matt. I don't get to, think about traveling to anywhere. Like, I'm not going to fly to Vancouver to promote anything because that would involve getting on a plane, and that's a difficult thing for both of us. So,
Right.
yeah.
Wow.
So, Heather has been very gracious about knowing going in that promotion was going to be a specific thing for us.
Right.
And, mind you, Matt is a huge networker in spite of what he says, and so am I. And I think so our networks are strong, and when we're working together, it'll be to the benefit of both of us.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. He's going to give me his community and I'm going to lend him mine.
Absolutely perfect. In terms of the plans that you do have, because your books are coming out like 1 month and then the next month, are there going to be joint events, joint celebrations, joint either book signings or even potentially virtual events, so people outside of the Sudbury area could actually benefit from attending virtually? Are things like that being planned?
I have inquired about that because it was asked of me whether there would be a visual component, a virtual component to the launch. And it wasn't confirmed. I mean, I would hope that there would be, because we both know what a valuable resource that is. But if not, well, then I am sure Matt and I will be together at some, because I mean, really, we kind of are like Eek and Meek here. We can really support each other. He's not much of a talker about his book, but it is a work. And so I think for all that he's not going to talk, I need to be there. And I would never say that my writing's going to make people cry. That's the wrong message. I wanted to make them laugh until they cry, but I don't necessarily want to make them cry. So I think together we will be together.
Right.
And I think it will be, signings here and there, possibly chapters, possibly, anywhere else. There are venues that we can go to and hopefully draw a crowd.
Awesome. Well, for my listeners, can you guys please let us know where we can find out more about you online?
I'm veraconstantineau.com, and I'm on Facebook and Twitter, and I'm on Instagram, even though I really suck at Instagram because I just got there late, didn't really know what I was doing. So all those things you don't see from me, they're coming.
Right.
And also, if you Google my name, I hate Google, but you'll see the pop-ups of things I've done in the past with other presses. And what isn't mentioned there anymore, though, and I'm really kind of sad about it, is my humor columns that used to appear in Northern papers.
Yeah.
And they're not available anymore online because that was a long time ago. I stopped
Right.
writing humor columns for the Northern papers in 2007. But I mean, too bad.
I sense there could be a collection of those columns all amalgamated together because the rights, I'm sure, reverted back to you, right?
They did, but actually talked to Linwood Barkley once at a reading festival. And he said he had thousands of columns and it was really hard to come up with a collection. And, I agree with that because things, especially where human columns are very sort of time sensitive.
Yeah.
Because generally speaking, you're making fun of what's happening now
That's
or
true.
in your life. And then that's all gone. And,
Yeah, well, Linwood had a really popular book at the time called Mike Harris Made Me Eat My Dog, but nobody would understand what he's referring to now. Who's
Yeah.
Mike Harris?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And Matt, where can we find out more about you online?
I write online at I have a website. It's called Del Papa's Place. It's on it's a Wix site. So if you just type in crashmat13.wixsite.com, it'll bring you right there. I also have a little website I work on for the town of Capreol called mycapreol.com. Both of those have some of my writings. Del Papa's Place has a picture. I should warn you, it's not the most complimentary picture. Not the photographer's fault. That's purely subject matter. I hate getting my picture taken, and it shows. So, but yeah, I'm online. I do. I write. I still write a monthly. Now it's a monthly. It was a bi-monthly column for the local Capreol paper. Essays and opinion pieces and humor, like Vera says.
Right.
And, most of the time that goes over well. Every once in a while, I insult the wrong person. Usually seniors. They do not have a sense of humor.
No.
That's I hate to make a generalization like that, but 99% of the hate mail I get is from seniors.
And he earns every one of them. I'm telling you now.
Yeah. At least their grammar and spelling is usually pretty good. I got to give them that. The seniors don't mess around.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm all over local Capreol stuff. If you're talking about Capreol writing, chances are I've stuck my nose in there somehow. So
of course, yeah. And even for creating an event a few years ago in Capreol to bring all kinds of people into the town that you're so proud of too.
Yeah, that was a great event. Mark was nice enough to come, and he sold. I think he sold a few books there, and it was a fun event for the centennial. That was part of the Capreol Centennial 100th
That's
birthday.
Right. And I have to admire when you mention your website and even your email, Crashmat. I mean, the humor never. The humor's never far away, is it?
Yeah, and I don't know if I should get into this, but Crash was my very first nickname growing up because when I got my first wheelchair, I tended to crash a lot, and I ran over a lot of toes, and I scraped the paint off a lot of walls, and the doors at various institutions, schools, and hospitals and stuff where I went, they had big gouges from where I hit them and stuff, and people learned very quickly, to their detriment, to get the hell out of my way. I didn't talk about this in my new book, but I have written an article about the 3 times when I accidentally took out multiple rows of seating at a school and sent students flying like bowling pins. And it was the first time was traumatic, the second time was humiliating, and the third time I was quietly asked to leave. So.
Well, I'm not asking either one of you leave, and in fact, I hope that you two can come back at some point, either individually or as a team. But thank you guys so much for being on the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mark. It was great.
It's so much fun getting a chance to talk with Matt and Vera, and every time I talk to, a dear companion, friend, fellow writer, fellow scribe, that's a cool thing. I mean, that's just awesomeness, right? But when that scribe, when that person, when that creative, when that storyteller, all of those things that, we love about that creative world that we're in as writers, when we also share the geography, when we also share growing up, living in a landscape that we have the commonality of that Sudbury region, it's just, there's something really powerful about it. And I was just reflecting on, I joined the Sudbury Writers Guild. I talked about that. I joined the Sudbury Writers Guild when I was living in Hamilton, and I wasn't able to attend. I think I've only been to maybe 3 or 4 meetings in all the years, and I'm no longer actually a member. I could be. They would accept me. That's the great thing, is the Sudbury community in general has always been so accepting and supportive. And I was thinking about that, and I've had some conversations. So I've had Heather, their publisher from Latitude 46, on this podcast. I'll have a link to my interview with Heather and I can't remember when I chatted with her, but I was talking to her about something else related to word stock, and I'm doing this project with the Sudbury Public Library, and I was talking to her about it, and we just, chatting, because we're, book nerds, book lovers, and the same sort of thing happened when she was temporarily been running indie bookstore in downtown Sudbury, and I just popped in to kind of hang out and chat with her as well. And I was just reminded of just how important community is. So I have with, one of my traditional publishers, so I have Spooky Sudbury, so with Dundurn, I've got True Ghost Story Books. And even though it's based on the smallest demographic of population, Spooky Sudbury remains my most popular best-selling book with Dundurn. Now, my Hamilton book still does fairly well, Haunted Hamilton, and Creepy Capital, which is the nation's capital, gets a lot of love. The Haunted Walks group in Ottawa are so amazing and supportive. They even sell the book in their gift shop alongside books written by their founder, Ghost Story Books. And Ottawa does well, but for some reason, despite the city itself has 90,000 people, maybe the whole outlying area is 125,000, maybe a maximum of 150,000 people in the greater Sudbury region, compared to a much larger population base in cities like Ottawa. And yet, Spooky Sudbury still sells years and years later after its release. And I've long believed that there's something about that community. There's something about the love and support that authors have for one another. And when I was talking to one of the librarians at Sudbury Library, and we were talking about Scott Overton and Dave Wickham, 2 other Sudbury authors that I know who've done some really cool in-person events there. And of course, this librarian knew who they were and was familiar with them, because there's this really special camaraderie that just is so valuable. So I'm reflecting on my own, my own stomping grounds, my own hometowns. The reflection, or the thing to remember, is, and this is a marketing tip I often give to writers, is define yourself as a big fish in a small pool. When I consider myself in the grand scheme of Canadian authors or horror authors or urban fantasy or true ghost story authors, I'm a small fish in a big, gigantic ocean. But when I go back and define myself in terms of those smaller, tighter knit communities, I'm a bigger fish. And that can be something that's not only good for your own ego, to remind yourself this as a writer too. Most people go back to your high school, right? Graduating class or whatever, last year of high school, and think of all the people in your class. Now, there were only, I think there were 30 people in my class. It's a small high school. But of all the people in my class, how many of them actually have published books? And I know one other person, awesome person, Lauren, and she lives in Southern Ontario as well. And I know she's published a few books as well. And she's a brilliant writer. Oh, I've always loved her writing. And I'm trying to think of anyone else from my graduating class, and I don't believe so. But think about that, and that's actually 2 out of 33 people, so actually a pretty high percentage. But think about all of those people. So all the people who think they're going to write a book and might one day write a book, but you, if you've written a book or had a story published or article or whatever, that's a unique thing. You're already a big fish in so many ways. My community, when I go back to thinking about my community, I just, the support and that camaraderie and that spirit that you get just lifts me up so much. And I just want to remind you, if it's important to you, to look for those kinds of communities, whether it's a local writers group, whether it's whatever, fellow creatives, or people from, who have that geographic, they share the horrors of, oh no, when is spring actually going to arrive? I'm getting more spring here in Waterloo, Ontario, which is about a 5-hour drive south from where I grew up. And I know they just got a massive dumping of snow on the weekend. So, but I still remember it, right? So even though I haven't lived in it, full time for a long time, I still know, and I can intimately remember, empathize as well with what's going on and how what they have to deal with as well. And then the very last thing, because it's I'm going on and on and on here, is I wanted to reflect. So this is not related to the interview, but it is related to the interview, because when I do the interview, because I go back to the emails and stuff to get the bios and the author photos that they shared, etc. And I'm reminded. So Matt's email, he has a signature in at the bottom of his emails, and it's this thing that just struck me, and I wanted to reflect on that. He has a quote in the bottom of his emails in the signature line that reads, "Make yourself a great day." Not have yourself a great day, but make yourself a great day. You see, it's an active thing. Something that you control. And Matt's subtly reminding everyone who reads his email, you're in charge. Make yourself a great day. So I'm going to borrow that from Matt. I'm going to borrow that from his email. I'm going to borrow that's an active, not a passive thing. Make yourself a great day. Because think about this. You think about what Matt and Vera have done with their poetry and their nonfiction and all of that stuff. They have chosen to do something very creative, very constructive, drawn upon their own, because they're both memoirs. And they've leveraged humor or imagery or whatever to help spark the imagination or the laughter or whatever it is that they're doing in their readers. They're making a great day, and they're giving you as a reader the opportunity to make a great day, but you are in control. So like Matt says, I'm going to close this out with not have yourself a great day, but make yourself a great day. Wonderful thing to reflect on. So thank you, Matt, and thank you, Vera, and thank you, dear listener, for listening. You can always leave comments over at starkreflections.ca. I love to hear your thoughts and your reflections on things that you've heard in the conversations or the reflections that made you reflect on something. Because, hey, we can all use that little extra reflection in our life. So, that is it for my reflections. That is it for this episode. Until next week and next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing, make yourself a great day, and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.